Hello everyone, and welcome to my second video of using Tana. In this video I'll show how I manage my meetings, and in the last one I showed focused mostly on task management. In the last video I showed how in the beginning of the week I make a weekly plan for which I select all of my tasks and to-dos, and then in each morning I go to my weekly plan and I assign certain to-dos to today, and they show up here. What I also do is I go through my calendar and I convert sort of the things on my calendar, meetings on my calendar, to meetings in Tana. Now, theoretically, I could also write some sort of script kit integration for this, but I actually kind of like the ritual of doing it. Plus, the majority of the work is actually not typing in the meeting, but more the other things, as I'll show in a bit. So let's get started and experiment a bit. So some of the meetings are sort of like project meetings. So if there's a project meeting for a specific project, I will simply just tag it as a generic meeting. And one of the things you see instantly is that there's a little checkbox in front of it. And that means that if for any reason I end up not having the meeting, I won't check this box. And that means that it will show up in my open tasks. It will show up here, so I am reminded that I probably have to do an action. Sometimes if it was my meeting, I might need to reschedule it, or if it is someone else's meeting, I might need to sort of ask for a summary of what happened or whatever. In any way, this is my way of making sure that I don't lose track of these things. After adding the meeting, I tend to add the attendees, and specifically the bigger the meeting, the more useful it is also to define a purpose in the beginning of the morning before actually having the meeting. So I'll go through maybe the email conversations that I've had and these kinds of things, and I will add the purpose that I want to achieve or that we want to achieve here, and it greatly helps keeping things on track. So in this case, I will, for instance, add Arturo. That went wrong. Add Arturo as one of the attendees. Arturo will be doing a lot of meetings today. The other meeting that is very common for me is a one-on-one meeting. And those are a little bit easier for me to add because most of the stuff has already been pre-filled. It's a one-on-one meeting and it has an attendee. I'll go in and I'll also add Arturo here. Generally, I add purposes, but they're not as important here because for the one-on-one meeting, Arturo would be in control of the topic of the meeting. What I do is I go into Arturo at the beginning of the morning and I'll see if I have any reminders. Reminders are things, for instance, in the last video, I said that I wanted to discuss this with Arturo, and these will show up here. Reminders will also include things like spotlights and personal goals, and I will show what those are later. If you look at the live query, it's basically whenever it's something that's not done and where that person is mentioned in the discuss with, the goal for, or the spotlight for. What I usually do is I go in, and let me get rid of this one for now, and I'll copy these things over to make sure that I don't forget them, because not always I will want to do everything in every meeting. Another type of meeting I tend to have quite often is coaching meetings, and these are generally a little bit longer, between an hour, 2 hours, and we call them 3P meetings. And they're a little bit different. Basically, they're still with one person, so we show up an attendee. I'll select Arturo here again. But these things have a very set format, so I'll tend to use a template. What I do is I simply reference the template. There it is. And in that case, I will clone the template and I will do something that's called hoist children to siblings, which will bring the template up into view, and then I'll remove the empty node there. Then I will expand everything and I'll be ready for the meeting. Now, during the meeting, I will go through each of these questions with them, and usually we end up finding some personal goals. So, for instance, Arturo, we, for instance, decide that his strength is that he is very analytical. And from that discussion, we tend to find out that he will have a personal goal that he should show this more in the organization. So show his analytical the goal skills more often. That will be his personal goal. I'll tag that as a personal goal, and it does several things. So first of all, when I tag it in this context, what happens is that it will also be automatically added to Arturo as a goal for. It does this by setting a specific field, so the goal for, and that field has an auto initializer. It's actually an advanced one here that shows like this. It's a lookup query. So what it will do, it will look for the instance of a meeting above, and it will find the attendees field, and it will actually add that one to the goal for. And that means that within this context, if I tag a personal goal, it will automatically be attached to Arturo. So in our next one-on-one meeting, when I go in and I go check the reminders, they will be here. So every time I have a one-on-one meeting with one of these people, I can see their personal development goals, and I can select the ones that I want to discuss at that time with them. What also happens is sometimes that we, during these meetings or whenever, we tend to find spotlights. And spotlights are things that I want to keep in mind, either for myself or for them. So, for instance, maybe during this spotlight, it feels like, hey, what gives us energy is if I validate them in a way that is very explicit. So I give them a compliment and I say, hey, this what I liked very much. And I tend to forget a lot of things, so I write them down. So, for instance, validate him very explicitly, use examples. And I'll tag that as a spotlight. For spotlight, I didn't use the same kind of structure, so I tend to select him manually because I tend to find them wherever. And these things, as I said before, they also show up here. Interestingly enough, I use the same structure when I am also finding stuff out about myself. I'll add a spotlight for myself to drink more because hydration is important. Tagging it with spotlight, I'll assign it to myself. And I'll make it a little bit more scannable, especially if you have a few, then it's easy to miss. Then I open this one, which I tend to do in the morning anyway, and I go through each of these to see, hey, are they relevant for me today? They are simple reminders. They don't work that well, but, well, I'll take anything that helps. That's it. That's how I deal with my meetings and spotlights and the personal goals of the people I talk to. Thank you for listening, and the next video will be on how I do my Zettelkasten.